Okay, is that everybody in at the moment that you've got waiting? Yeah. Okay, so we'll make a start for this Access webinar. I'm absolutely delighted today that we are hosting Dr. George Warren from the University of Surrey. We're chaired today by Professor Nigel Gilbert. So I am going to hand over to Nigel, who'll introduce George. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. We are recording the webinar, but it will only be the main presentation, not the Q&A part of it. So handing over to Nigel now. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm Nigel Gilbert from the University of Surrey, and I'm a member of Access. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. George Warren, who is an Access Knowledge Exchange Fellow. He's an interdisciplinary environmental social scientist with a particular passion for the application of findings from environmental psychology, geography, and other social sciences to UK policy. George's research is primarily focused on perceptions of environmental risk and other individual or socio-demographic factors that shape pro-environmental behaviours. George will be presenting his Environmental Social Science Knowledge Exchange Map of Opportunities, or ESS NEMO for short, systems maps and other resources that show the groups, organisations and individuals that are involved with environmental action and policy. As Sarah said, the webinar will be recorded and posted on the Access website along with our other previous webinars. Do please sign up to our email newsletter to hear about our future programme of webinars and activities. George is going to speak for about 25 to 30 minutes, leaving good time for questions and answers afterwards. Please do use the Q&A button that you'll see on your screen to ask questions. Okay, over to you, George.
Hi everyone, let me just share my slides and welcome to the webinar. All right, so hopefully you can see that. Thumbs up from Nigel. Yeah, lovely. All right, then we'll get started. So welcome everyone to this webinar, and thanks Nigel for the introduction. Here today we'll be presenting work from Access on knowledge exchange maps that we've given the acronym ESS NEMO, and but the webinar broadly is also about thinking about using knowledge exchange maps for impact, collaboration and understanding. In today's webinar, I'm going to do a bit of a background on why we're doing systems map for knowledge exchange. I'm going to introduce the ESS NEMO and the method we took to co-produce systems maps within Access. And then I'm going to present what we've produced, what we can do with it, and thinking about how we can use ESS NEMO to assist those in policy and practice. We've got a nice recording from Harry Marshall from Forest Research, talking through his experience of using ESS NEMO in his work, and then some conclusions, limitations and recommendations for using systems maps for impact. So thinking broadly, why is this work needed? Some of you will already know about Access, but of course the purpose of Access itself is to champion environmental social science and create a network to strengthen the groups of disciplines within environmental social science. And within that, there are 4 main work packages. I'm on work package 1, which is broadly speaking about mapping, assessing and learning. But also we have work package 2 on empowerment and skills, work package 3 on innovation and agility, and work package 4 on outreach and data exchange. In this work, we'll be focusing on work done by work package 1, my work package. If you'd like to find out more about Access in general and the different work packages, then please look on the website. There's going to be a link at the end as well you can go to. So when we think about knowledge exchange, first off, what is knowledge exchange? Broadly speaking, UKRI defines this as the process of exchanging information between researchers and research users to share ideas, research evidence, experiences and skills. But broadly speaking, this can also be outside of research domains. In the context of this talk, though, we can think about knowledge exchange through Lasswell's model of communication, the 5 W's and H of communication: who, what, why, when, where, and how. This session focuses really on who we should involve in the work we undertake, who we should engage with, who we should communicate with. As a result of the focus on who, we were keen to create a series of systems maps that outline the kinds of groups, organisations and individuals we could engage with for research, development and innovation in the UK context. And so the link to what I'll be talking about today is in the corner, and I think Sarah will be putting it in the chat as well, so hopefully you can follow that up afterwards. In terms of the method we took to undertake producing these systems maps, the systems maps themselves were made using Prism, which is a software developed by Nigel and colleagues. And it's a system mapping software that's really easy to use and creates very nice visualizations. You can see the example here on the right. So thanks to Nigel for using the software, and it is free to use in case you're interested in creating your own systems maps. In terms of the creation of the maps themselves, these were undertaken between November last year and July, and the final update of the maps was just after the general election in July. Broadly speaking, the kind of premise for undertaking this activity and the inspiration started from my own personal perspective and those of partners in the project about not necessarily having a full knowledge of where best to have impact in one's own research and engaging with a broad range of stakeholders. And in terms of the visualization itself and undertaking a systems map approach to this, we were inspired by past visualizations of parts of the map, for example, the Open Innovation team presenting past work on the makeup of DEFRA and associated arm's length bodies, and a systems map created by Go Science, the Government Office for Science, of Science Advisory Councils and arm's length bodies. Based off this, though, we understood that these were still only parts of the overall map, and creating an overall ecosystem would be helpful to create a map of opportunities for environmental social scientists. In terms of the data collection, we undertook an iterative co-production with 32 co-producers, most of whom identify or are environmental social scientists or researchers from research institutions or parts of the UK or devolved government bodies, predominantly from environmental domains. Alongside this, we undertook a desk-based data collection for names of specific entities, parts of UK government, and curating the broader groupings within the systems maps that were developed from the interviews with the co-producers and their engagement. In terms of the approach we took, as with all work undertaken in Access, it was rooted in guiding principles of environmental sustainability, equality, diversity and inclusion, and knowledge co-production that are central. If you'd like to find out more about this, there'll be a link in the chat as well, hopefully. With the map, we had to think carefully about the criteria for inclusion. And so the ESS NEMO and associated documents include bodies, organizations, groups and individuals that are either found to be currently or previously undertaking work that includes environmental social science, either in the form of knowledge exchange or research, or represent entities that environmental social scientists and researchers could be engaging with in the future, decided by the co-producers of the map. In terms of the government entities, these were developed by searching public documents, web pages, and in discussions with co-producers, or through Gov.uk through official portals. Broadly speaking, we're going to be talking a lot about environmental social science, and we define this within Access as the systematic study of the interrelationship between people, the social environment, and the natural or non-human environment. So it's quite a broad range of different kinds of entities that are involved in that process. In terms of boundaries for the map, ESS NEMO is bounded geographically and focuses specifically on UK-based entities and only includes international entities if they have a significant involvement in the UK in some way or where the UK is a partner. If you'd like more in-depth information on the method, inclusion criteria and boundaries, I'd recommend checking out the explanatory document that we've created. Hopefully the link will be in the chat. So, off the back of that, we've produced the ESS NEMO. You can't say that academics don't love an acronym. And so we've created the Environmental Social Science Knowledge Exchange Map of Opportunities. And so this is a bundle of resources, really. It includes 2 systems maps, the landscape map of the overall ecosystem and the Westminster map, very specific to the UK government in Westminster, and I'll get into that in a bit. Alongside that, we've also created a list version of the maps with a large range of entities that I'll also show. And We also have an explanatory document that provides the information that I just mentioned in the slide previously about what's in the ESS NEMO, what we did and why, and then some case studies of how ESS NEMO can be used and applied. And also we'll be presenting some new ones here today. So hopefully there'll be a large range of ways in which you could use this in your own role and get inspiration from the work that we're doing. So starting with the overall picture, this is the ESS NEMO landscape map. And this is the overall picture of the kinds of entities we can be engaging with. It looks complex. I'll go through it very briefly, but you're very welcome to go through it in your own time to explore it in further detail. And hopefully the case study examples will clarify how it works and in what way. The map itself is split into 3 levels. We have the knowledge exchange organization groups in teal. So for example, over here on the left, you have civil society, you have local government down here, and you have commercial entities, for example. These are very high level organizational groupings. Alongside kind of the level underneath, you could think of this as a bit of a Russian doll almost. You have the organizational subcategories in lime green. For example, these are universities down here at the bottom, which are within research, development and innovation organizations. We have Parliament up in the top right, which is linked to political organizations. And these sit within the knowledge exchange organization groups as a sort of mid-level. And then within those organizational subcategories, we have further subcategories in orange. And so these include things like business improvement districts, which are regional level organizations that sit within local government. It's just more specific to provide a certain fine-tooth approach of when we're looking at these kinds of broad groupings. Obviously, at the middle level, there will be a large range of groups with different priorities, different political ideologies, different topic areas, different sizes, and so that's why we thought it was important to have a 3rd level there too. We've also produced a second map, which I'll get onto in a second, but the second map is essentially a map within a map. It's an in-depth part of the map focusing on the UK government in Westminster due to its complexity. So I thought I'd show you that before we move on to that. And this is the second map. This is the ESS NEMO Westminster map. It's a map specifically of the UK government due to its complexity, as said, and it includes a wide range of different kinds of organisations that sit within what we would describe as UK Gov. That includes ministerial departments in teal. So for example, down in the bottom left, you have DEFRA. You have executive agencies such as the Met Office in orange. You have science advisory councils and committees. So for example, SAGE in purple, public corporations such as the BBC in light blue, executive and advisory non-departmental public bodies in beige and pink respectively, and other entities in red, and those include things like the British Geological Survey, 10 Downing Street, Go Science, GCHQ, MI6. At this level, it's more specific, especially in the context of the UK government, with names of specific entities at this point, which are not present in the first map. Alongside these 2 maps, we've created a list version, which is essentially an online spreadsheet of entities. There are thousands of entities listed in the spreadsheet, so I'd recommend going and having a look. It's not exhaustive, I would say that, but it's at least a start towards looking at the kinds of entities that we could be engaging with in the work that we do. It's a searchable document that complements the systems maps with greater specificity. And so here, for example, we can see that within commercial entities, there are energy and utility companies, and we may want to, for example, engage with power generation companies. And so we have a list of some of the ones that are present in the UK. The spreadsheet itself is searchable, as you'll see later on, and you can apply filters too if you download your own copy. So you're more than welcome to do that too. I won't go into detail about the explanatory document today. It's more of a guide to help navigate and understand the maps, but I'd recommend using it if you're using the maps in the future. So broadly speaking, what can we do with ESS NEMO? We can think of this in 3 main ways. Others are also possible, but this is a nice conceptualization based on some work that we've been doing in defining environmental social science. The first is that ESS NEMO can offer practical insights. It can offer practical answers on who we can exchange knowledge with as a map. The second is that ESS NEMO can assist in diagnosis and evaluation, so it can help study past and present relationships to forecast and advise on where we should go next. And the third is as a tool to provide critique and provide opportunities for innovation, reflection on practice. I'll be going through some specific examples of these three now. So the first is around practical insights. And so one way we might want to think of this is around stakeholder mapping. This is getting us to think about who we want to engage with, and the map can be a map for that. So I thought I'd give a few examples based on my own PhD research before this role. I can think of many entities within the UK government where findings from my PhD research would be really relevant to their work. So for example, down here we have the Committee on Fuel Poverty, because I was looking at socio-demographic differences in domestic energy use. We also have the Climate Change Committee. I asked members of the public about their views on climate change and the relationship between a large amount of variables and beliefs and perceptions of climate change. Related again to fuel poverty and socio-demographics, we have places like the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government that may also be interested in these kinds of findings. And perhaps a bit less traditionally, we have places like the Department for Health and Social Care Science Advisory Councils that might be really interested in this work because of its focus on vulnerabilities, comfort and health in housing. So that's just an example of ways we can think about stakeholder mapping in this context. Alongside that, ESS NEMO can also be used as a tool for evaluation. For example, who is within an organisation or at a conference or a meeting, and what kind of organisations they engage with to highlight strengths and gaps in the approach of any group. So this actually, I'm sorry, it's a photo rather than a nice cleaned up image, but this is an example from the Clean Air Programme conference in Birmingham in September that I went to, where I got members of the conference, attendees, to put stickers for where they are based and who they engage with on the map. So here, the black dots represent where people are based, what kind of role they have in what kind of organisation, and the orange dots represent where they engage, what kinds of broad groupings they engage with. And so without going into too much detail, what we can see here is that within the cohort of the conference, there are a lot of academics, not necessarily a surprise. Down here with all the black and red, that's universities, a lot of academics were at this conference. However, they're broadly speaking engaging across the board, but certain areas are receiving a bit less attention, particularly around local government and devolved government and some areas of civil society, which is quite interesting to think about in this context. Off the back of this work that was done last month, I'm writing a blog and getting the organisers to reflect on who they invite to these conferences and who they engage with and the work they do, because it is very transdisciplinary already, but there are opportunities to broaden that net out further. The final way in which ESS NEMO can be used is as a critique. So this picture here is actually a case study example analysis of the groups of actors engaged in a Go Science Foresight project on net zero society. And currently we're also working on using ESS NEMO as a sort of framework for critically evaluating the inclusion of diverse voices into environmental social science projects, such as a broader range of these Go Science Foresight projects, and thinking of subsequently analysing which entities have engaged with other similar activities that bring lots of diverse groups together. So places like the Environmental Audit Committee, for example. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Harry Marshall, who's a social scientist of Forest Research, which is a government arm's length body, about his experience of using ESS NEMO for his own work and giving a live demonstration of how he can use it for a real life project. I'm sorry, I need to stop sharing and move to the other way of sharing, so just bear with me 1 second while I do that. Yeah, thanks, Harry, for that. Hopefully that was a really helpful indicative example of how ESS NEMO can be used, more specifically in the kind of stakeholder mapping area. So that's, yeah, a really nice example, hopefully. Now just finishing up with a couple of slides, some conclusions and limitations. Descriptive systems maps like ESS NEMO can open up our eyes to collaboration opportunities and make us aware of the range of entities in our ecosystem that we can include, collaborate with, share findings with, and learn from in the work that we do. Overall, the system is vast. There are so many actors. There are thousands in our spreadsheet alone, and that is by far not all of the actors that we could be engaging with in this space and including in the work that we do. It's also complex. There are connections everywhere between the entities that we haven't mapped, and these entities work across organizational groupings collaboratively, but often their work is hidden from potential partners who could really benefit from the work done. And it's really diverse. There are so many different kinds of actors with unique ways of working, priorities and capacities and scales. And that's really important to consider when we're thinking about who we want to include in the work that we do. When we think about ESS NEMO in general, obviously what Harry presented there is a much more instrumental way of using the map, but there are also evaluative and critical uses of systems maps such as ESS NEMO. But what we've presented today is by no means everything, and I'm sure there'll be, hopefully this talk will give you inspiration to think about the ways in which you can use these kinds of maps in different ways to what we've suggested too. Of course, like all work, there are limitations, and ESS NEMO is no exception. With this kind of work, we didn't assess strength of connections between entities or groups of entities, and that's important to clarify when we discuss who's in the map and the relationships between organizations in the map. In terms of the accuracy of the map, this depends very much on the people who are involved in the project and my own work. Obviously, these were co-produced with a group, and it's likely that there was a focus very much more on the environmental side, but there's also like a likelihood that there are groups of entities we may have missed. As said, the list of entities is also indicative and is not exhaustive, so rely somewhat on individual inspiration or extra Googling if you're looking for specific kinds of organizations that are not listed in the list version. On top of that, map maintenance is an important thing to consider when thinking about any kind of map like this, not just this kind of map. The ecosystem itself is constantly evolving, names of entities are changing all the time, and new entities and groups of entities are becoming more relevant, and maintenance for this is time consuming and may not be done rapidly enough to meet the rate of change. That's important to consider if you're thinking of producing a map like this, that the version you may create may end up being out of date quite quickly. In terms of recommendations for using ESS NEMO and systems mapping in general, I'd recommend thinking broadly about the ecosystem and who we can engage with. There's a whole world of potential partners out there that are very diverse and important in different geographical topic communities and at different scales. Of course, I would recommend it, but I would ask that you use ESS NEMO in the work you do to inform your who of knowledge exchange. You're also very welcome to build on or adapt ESS NEMO. While we have on the website read-only versions of the maps available, if you'd like an editable version of your own, or you want to make your own systems map building on our work, then please get in touch and we can give you a transferable instance of the map if you're interested in starting doing some systems mapping of your own off of an existing template. I'd also recommend engaging with access findings and the guiding principles in general when you're thinking about knowledge exchange and the ways in which you might want to do that. We have a lot of resources available on the website, and you can get in touch with us as well about finding out how to do that more. And of course, if you do any of these things and you use the work that we do, please do tell us about it. You can email us on the link there, or you can email us personally or via the website as well. So with that, I say thank you very much for listening to this webinar. Hopefully it was really informative about how these kinds of systems maps can help you undertake knowledge exchange, and also thinking about how you can use ESS NEMO in the work you do. If you'd like to find out more, I've got the links there. There's a link to the Knowledge Exchange Maps page and to the General Access Network too, and a quick QR code. And I'll wait about 30 seconds before bringing it down. But also, I think Sarah's been putting those links in the chat too. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to taking questions.